Nigeria's market regulator has issued a set of digital asset restrictions and now some interesting regulations signaling that the continent's most populous country is aiming to strike a compromise between outright crypto asset bans and unregulated use. Last year, Nigeria's Apex Bank prohibited banks and other financial organizations from trading with or assisting digital currency transactions. However, the country's young and tech-savvy population has embraced cryptocurrencies, employing crypto exchanges peer-to-peer trading to circumvent the prohibition. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) has announced the new rules on issuance, offering platforms, and custody of digital assets. The 54-page paper outlines the registration requirements for digital asset issuers and custodians, as well as classifying the assets as securities subject to SEC regulation. The market regulator stated that no digital asset exchange would be permitted to support asset trading unless the Commission issued a no objection finding. SEC's stance contrasts sharply with that of the Central Bank of Nigeria, which currently prohibits local financial institutions from transacting with crypto-related enterprises. The new SEC guidelines, for example, mandate that token issuance platforms and exchanges keep trust accounts with receiving banks. Overall, this step may lend legitimacy to crypto and related enterprises, perhaps opening new avenues for crypto adoption in Nigeria, which is one of the world's major crypto markets. SEC's guidelines may also give the CBN a framework under which the country's financial institutions can interact with cryptocurrency. Today, our focus is Nigeria setting rules for crypto assets. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Let's get to it. Now joining me from London, United Kingdom, is Ola Atose. He's the founder of Koinkoin Exchange. Ola, welcome to Business Edge once again. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, good morning, Tolu. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start. These new rules are issued under the Securities and Exchange Commission. And we've seen that it was also in 2020 that the Commission released a framework on digital assets and their classification and treatment. So SEC has always been ready to move forward with digital assets, particularly crypto. Why do you think SEC was more willing to adopt this than the CBN?
Well, that's a question I think we all have. It's all well and fair that the SEC has actually set out some terms, conditions by which digital assets operating platforms and anyone who wishes to offer tokens will have to abide by. But we're all still very curious as to what the view of the central bank, will be on this. So for the time being, of course, we've all been sort of going through the paperwork, the 54-page document set out by the SEC. I feel personally that it's a step in the right direction, of course. But then again, we need the support of the central bank and the finance ministry, along with the SEC, to know exactly how we will be proceeding. Of course, with regards to the banks, the CBN is still, in control and is the regulator. So we're still sort of, curious to hear what the position of the CBN actually is at the moment.
Okay, so we're waiting for the CBN to sort of release their own position paper on this. But Ola, we've had conversations on this, and SEC is treating cryptocurrencies and CBDCs and whatever else as digital assets that fall under their purview. By your own understanding of this market and what's happening now, who should be regulating? Because it brings us back to the conversation we had in 2021 when the CBN moved in to tell banks and other financial organizations to have no dealings with crypto transactions. So who should be regulating this particular aspect of the sector?
The Securities Exchange Commission, their view, I would presume, and I haven't spoken to them, their view, I would presume, is exchanges or anything that's considered an asset would come under their purview. That said, the CBN and the restrictions they're put in place are perhaps largely because a number of people view digital assets as a form of currency. And if it is indeed a currency, then perhaps we should hear from the CBN. So I think that's sort of, where we are. So I think given that the banks will be needed in any way, if this is going to go ahead or if the SEC is going to roll this out, then we do need to hear from the banks. And of course, the Apex Bank being the CBN have to take a position. My view is that, we have to understand how the CBN wants to proceed before we can actually say, hey, we can now sort of all jump on and begin obviously putting our applications forward. So I think that the point which the CBN has to clear for us is, okay, fine, digital assets are indeed assets. The Exchange Commission should have oversight of any exchange of, these tokens. But what is the CBN going to do with its view as it applies to, digital assets being viewed as a currency?
So we know that Nigeria's tech-savvy young population has circumvented the restrictions that the CBN put in place. But with this regulation now from SEC, is there any way for it to work without the CBN lifting the restrictions on banks and financial institutions transacting with digital assets, particularly cryptocurrencies? Is there any workaround if the CBN refuses to revisit, review, and lift that restriction?
So as you mentioned, the tech-savvy population in Nigeria, I think roughly at last count, about 32 million in Nigeria have been trading cryptocurrency, regardless of the restriction put in place by the central bank. And this is done largely by the platforms who offer P2P. So the sort of P2P has allowed, folks to sort of connect and sort of, send funds to each other's bank accounts, if you like, or meet in person, and then exchange cryptocurrency. So that's still going ahead. One of the issues I think both the CBN and the SEC would agree with is there is need for some sort of control of the space from an AML, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing perspective. And I think that's actually one of the points which the SEC sort of, highlighted in their paper. But at the same time, if this is still going ahead and, we are aware that the CBN actually fined some banks not too long ago. So if this is sort of going on and people are still trading it, I think some form of regulation is needed. People need to be protected within reason. They need to understand what they're getting involved in. And of course, one of the concerns, that I have, again, personally, is the fact that, this regulation, given the cost to actually get regulated, push out some of the local players. And of course, in Nigeria, there are a lot of exchanges which are owned and sort of ran by Nigerians, but this sort of high cost which has been put on for registration in itself may actually push out the local players and allow for just sort of the international players in that space. But I think, the regulation is definitely a right step, a step in the right direction from the AML perspective, and of course, from the counter-terrorist financing perspective. But that said, I think, we need more. We certainly need to hear where the CBN stands. And of course, we need to perhaps have, the exchanges give their view on what will happen given some of those high costs for registration. Perhaps, if we have a look at it, maybe give some feedback, the SEC may maybe be willing to sort of look at reducing some of those costs.
Okay, so you mentioned, of course, that peer-to-peer was a way for young Nigerians to move around this. But Nigeria happens to be one of the largest crypto trading markets in the world. And I really want to understand, how did that happen? What is it about particularly this digital asset of cryptocurrency that has gotten young Nigerians so, maybe let's use the word hype? Why are they so really invested in it? And in that regard, is Nigeria missing out on possible fees that the country could be making as part of, making money from the transactions that are happening around the country, in the country, moving out of the country and coming into the country as well?
Yes, I guess, that's sort of the next point to the point I made. Of course, there is not just revenue for exchange owners, but there is revenue for the country as well. And of course, Nigerians make up one of the largest populations that trade cryptocurrency, not just in Africa, but across the world. As a result, yes, currently Nigeria is missing out on fees. Nigeria isn't the only nation that's sort of looking to regulate crypto. The United Kingdom has got regulation in place. Some countries in the Far East as well, Dubai, of course. So a number of different countries are already doing this. So I think Nigeria should definitely do it. In terms of why Nigerians are interested in cryptocurrency, well, there are a number of reasons. So we all knew what happened during the sort of dot-com explosion about 20 years ago. What happened after that with sort of, if you like, Web 2 with things like Facebook, eBay and the likes, and what sort of explosion we saw there. And now with crypto, the view is Web 3 and how we can almost digitize everything. So not just goods and services that you buy, but from things like property, land ownership, if you like, shipping, if you wish. Almost everything can be done, on the blockchain, and crypto will be, if you like, not crypto, digital assets will be some sort of fees and funds for that. And on top of all that, the digital assets allow local Nigerians to sort of keep more of their money, given the value of the naira. So a lot of young people sort of found a way around getting their naira into digital assets, choose to do that because ultimately they get to keep more of their money and they're not necessarily hit, as has been the case with the depreciating naira. So that's, I think, the view. And of course, it's not just sort of young people. Businesses are now foraying into digital assets, and of course, a lot of people are now hearing about it. Sort of ease for remittances, money moving not just in Nigeria, but from other countries into Nigeria, from Nigeria in the sort of Pan-African world now, where we now see users trading, cross-border in Africa in the quickest way, quicker than the banks can ever do it, right? So people are now starting to realize that there's so much business that can be done using digital assets in a way that we not just in Nigeria, but across Africa didn't do previously.
All right, so Ola, hold the line. When we come back, we'll look more at some of the things put out in the SEC regulation in terms of the fees, as you mentioned, and the anti-money laundering as well as financing terrorism aspect of it. There are concerns around the world as to where digital currencies, particularly cryptocurrency, will take us. While most countries around the world are embracing cryptos, many African nations have adopted a slightly different approach. It was not only Nigeria that chose to ban crypto transactions or warn their banks to avoid them. Kenya did as well. And at the same time, others like South Africa are promoting digital asset transactions. The conversation continues after this. Still with me today is Ola Atose. He's the founder of Koinkoin Exchange as we look at Nigeria's Securities and Exchange Commission setting new rules for the adoption of digital assets. Now, there was something Ola mentioned earlier, and let's take a closer look at that, and that's the regulation around who can, of course, deal in digital assets. Now, companies who want to supply any form of cryptocurrency product or service in Nigeria or to Nigerians must now obtain a virtual asset service provider license. And they must pay a registration cost of 30 million naira, about $73,000 among other fees. So Ola, let's come in here. You said earlier, of course, that you thought this was something that would end up pushing out local players and making way for more international players to come in this market. And as you mentioned earlier, a market that has about 30-something million Nigerians somehow getting involved in one way or the other, one of the largest crypto markets in the world. Is there any other way around this? Is this a fee that you think is being set to just limit the number of people coming in, whether they're local or international, or is it something you think is aiming to push the local players out of the game?
I wouldn't really say that the intention is to push the local players out. I think the intention is to ensure regulation, or proper regulation of the space. But then the next question is, how do you enforce? The regulation? Right. So this is the question that we sort of need to start asking. So if, say, a number of people, get registered and they get their VASP, which is a virtual asset service provider license, as you mentioned, how do you then enforce that those, license trading in Nigeria, right? So this is the question. I mean, I just mentioned earlier, about 32 million Nigerians are still trading crypto despite the CBN restriction. How do you enforce a license? So that's one question we have to ask. And of course, even if some local players can get on, some of those costs are pretty high. Capital cost of 500 million the deposit requirement is pretty high, I would say, for some of the exchange holders. The initial registration fee, form fee, and a number of other fees, which are well over 30 million naira, is also quite high. I feel that this may sort of squeeze, the industry and kind of leave it open for for the international players to come in. Of course, we want international presence in the industries in Nigeria. This is part of, competition, and certainly what makes, Nigeria the great country that it is. But at the same time, we mustn't overlook local talent. And, my concern is these fees are, quite high. And some of our local talent, may be dismissed or sort of, pushed to the side, as I said, because of some of these fees. That said, the AML, CTF piece is just as critical, and it is necessary to ensure that, if you want to come into that space, other than just the AML and CTF piece, the SEC is sort of looking for those with the relevant experience in the financial industry to come into the crypto space, and not just sort of, anyone. So I can understand the perspective the SEC is taking on that, but at the same time, I'd like to see enough room and space, for the young people in Nigeria.
And I'm happy you brought up the issue around the anti-money laundering and, of course, counterterrorism financing guidelines. So SEC wants each of the institutions or whoever signs up and gets a license to be part of this and follow these guidelines. And you've talked about, of course, the enforcement and regulation. Do you think with everything that SEC has put forward, SEC has the ability to enforce each and every single one of these regulations down to the letter so that they can clean up the industry? Because we know from the CBN, we know from others that one of the biggest issues is the anonymous, almost non-traceable nature of cryptos. That has worried a number of countries. So does SEC really have the ability to enforce what they're putting forward?
Well, this is a question we must ask them. So yes, there is, the whole nature of cryptocurrency and digital assets in their current form is to be decentralized, and the nature of decentralization is for that sort of, anonymity and the view that people can sort of move funds and do so at their will without oversight of any central authority. That is decentralization 101. That said, everything is traceable. It is possible, the technology does exist to allow for some sort of travel rule as it applies to money today, in terms of, using things like, SWIFT, for example. The travel rule in place, the travel rule being where is money coming from and where is it going to? And do we have details of clients, of sites, right? So this is something which is possible with centralized exchanges, such as Koinkoin. And of course, we are happy to support, that travel rule or its necessity as it would apply to, I don't know, perhaps certain volumes of crypto. So there's oversight over who's doing what. And of course, we enhance AML and CTF that way. But that's me speaking with the banker's hat on. Different views exist for why cryptocurrencies should exist, and, how people wish to take on transactions at their own will and not have the government or any oversight, body look into what they're doing. But again, that's a conversation for a different time. It is possible to trace cryptocurrency transactions in their current form. And if that is part of what the regulator is asking for, then it will be, the onus will be on us exchanges to try and make that happen. Okay. And of course, again, as I say, it is possible. It does take us away from the sort of, the whole point of decentralization. But now there are a number of different platforms. One platform is, some platforms allow for centralization and other platforms allow for, decentralization, right? So it's really down to the preference of the user. Where do they want to go? Do they want to trade sort of in that offline nature? Or are they actually happy to have their funds protected and have the protection of the SEC and other regulatory bodies, such that if there's any loss of funds or any other issues, they can sort of say, hey, I've got this issue, I'm going to go speak to the regulator. So it's really
let me take you up Let me take you up. I apologize for interrupting. Time is not with us, but let me take you up on that protection aspect, because another interesting clause is that license holders in particular must collect self-declared risk acknowledgement papers from users, as well as a disclaimer that investment losses are not covered by any protection fund. Does this sort of not lay the groundwork for fake initial coin offerings? Is there any measure of protection to be found for Nigerians in these new SEC regulations?
So what I'd say is, with regards to the initial coin offerings, I think the world, Nigeria included, learned a very special lesson in 2017. A lot of these came up, and there are current warnings from exchange owners like myself and others, sort of warning people, don't just jump on the next coin or token that comes along. You need to know where it's from, what it's about. So there is sort of a lot of education within the space, which is sort of there to help users and individuals. And to sort of give them a guide on what to do and what not to do, and when to run away from certain type of tokens. So that's been going on for the last 5 years in some form. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there is a requirement typically when people register, sign up on an exchange platform, that we sort of have a disclaimer, not really a disclaimer, but sort of put them through some sort of basic multiple choice questions. Do you know what cryptocurrency is? Do you know that you could lose your funds by trading crypto? And if they answer yes, yes, and yes, then the view is they know enough. But on top of that, one of the things that we like to do, at Koinkoin, is we like to go out of our way to sort of, train and provide levels of education, to our users, sort of giving them a view on, on our blog, what they need to be aware of, what they need to run away from, and obviously the fact that not all tokens that come to market are safe for trading.
Yeah.
So this is something that the industry is sort of taking on. We want the industry to last. We're hoping that the industry will go, a lot further, in the years to come. And we all have a responsibility to educate the user on what cryptocurrencies are and how to avoid scams, how to avoid, these sort of ICOs, which haven't gone through the sort of rigorous testing that you'd expect them to go to. And now with the regulation, if they're not regulated, my view would be don't trade them.
All right. Ola, we'll leave it at that for now, because we will be waiting to hear what the CBN has to say about this. And then, of course, with some of the feedback from the industry as well, if the Securities and Exchange Commission might make some amendments to some of the regulations. And when there's an update, we'll definitely touch base with you. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And crypto trading made its way to Africa during the early 2010s. But we on the continent were already familiar with digital transactions such as remittances and mobile money. In all likelihood, the majority of African countries will continue their hard stance against crypto payments. But at the end of the day, what we know is that regulators must decide and find a middle ground that ensures that the locals can reap the benefits of digital asset transactions while risk mitigation and compliance are prioritized. Up next is NC4 to watch. And a few stories for you to keep your eyes on as we also keep our eyes on them. We start in Nigeria, where according to the International Monetary Fund's 2021 Article 4 estimates, Africa's most populous nation spent 85% of its revenue on servicing debt in 2021. And let me get you some more of these stories that we're keeping our eyes on. And what we also found out is that, on the other hand, South Africa's budget office, situated in the National Treasury, estimated that its debt service to revenue in 2021 was around 20%, explaining that for every 5 rand raised by the government, only 1 rand was spent on servicing debt. And still in South Africa, the rand fell in early trade on Monday amid subdued risk-taking as investors sought safety due to the fears about global growth, while power cuts on the domestic front clouded the economic growth outlook. Early this morning, the rand traded at 16.2270 against the dollar. Dutch Bank would reportedly not fund a pipeline in Africa that environmentalists claim will relocate thousands of families and may destroy natural reserves. The projected $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline, which would span over 1,400 kilometers from Uganda to Tanzania, has prompted Germany's top lender to explain its position on financing. And finally, crude oil prices fell on Monday, paring early gains as investors took profit following a surge in the previous session, albeit in the shadow of supply fear as the European Union prepares an import ban on Russian crude and with limited increase in OPEC output. Brent crude futures were down $1.42 to $110.13 a barrel early this morning. And that's Business Edge for you. Don't forget that you can, of course, follow us on social media. Go to our website, download our mobile app, and, of course, check us out on YouTube if you've missed any of our conversations. Don't forget to watch us on the platforms we are available. I'll be back 11 a.m. West African time as we put African business, the economy, and, of course, finance front and center. I'm Tolulope Adeleru-Balogun. Do have a fantastic day.